Hello everyone, today we are going to be working on and fixing the main safety feature on a 55 Packard. Its horn. Now on a Packard car you have two horns actually. One of them is low pitch and the other is high pitch, so that they make this harmonious tone, so to speak. You can actually see this one says low. They are two different part numbers. You cannot adjust one to the other. You actually have to have the two different horn part numbers. But we can start off here by taking the cover off, which is just this slot here. This one I actually already fixed, but I'll just walk you through what I did because the other video just got a little bit too drawn out. So we can first see how the horn operation works. We have our power that goes in here, and it goes into this relay contact, essentially. And when it bridges that contact, it goes into this wire, which goes into the magnetic coil, which connects back to ground. And whenever this relay contact opens, obviously the circuit turns off. But how it is you have, this is normally closed, so when it applies power to the coil, it pushes down and it opens that relay contact. Focus. There we go. And then obviously that cuts power, so it closes back up. The cycle repeats, and you end up with the horn action. This thing actually ends up actuating a diaphragm placed under here, and the air travels this way to get amplified to go out the front of the horn, of course. So what the original problem was on this horn is that these were adjusted way too far up. They do have to be adjusted pretty much just right. So what we can do to check that is use an ohm meter on this. Now a lot of times also, these contacts, especially if you get like a real grungy car, these contacts will have a lot of corrosion on them. So you can just tighten this nut down just enough where you can fit a piece of sandpaper in there. And obviously just work it back and forth to kind of sand down the top one, flip it over, work it back and forth to sand down the bottom one. And I always like to try and take an air gun or something and blow that out just in case there's any grit in there, or you can wash it out with some type of mild cleaner or something, alcohol, whatever. But once you have those, or I should say, it's not strictly required because you can just try and check it with a ohm meter, which I'll explain in a second, and adjust it. And if it works, sure, fine, throw it back on the car. But it's kind of best practice. If you see that they're a little bit corroded, probably good to clean them up. So the actual adjustment process is we can hook up our friendly ohm meter. So first of all, you want to make sure that you have some nicely polished power contacts. So this, you have a tab here, so I just cleaned this up with some steel wool, and then you also have these posts. Now, once you bolt it to the car, because the threads are kind of abrading against themselves and whatnot, normally the connection will be fine. But for just something with like alligator clips, you're not having the same effect happening. So I like to take some steel wool and try and clean up the surface of the threads, or whatever part I happen to be attaching my alligator clip to make sure that it's actually going to have a good connection there. So we got our ohm meter here. We are reading 0.05 ohms. Just another random note, ohm meters, like just regular things, they do not read well at low ohm readings, so this may well be way less than 0.05 ohms. Actually, it should be, because this thing draws, this thing draws an average of about 9 amps at 13 volts, which would be an average of 1.4 ohms. But I digress. Obviously, we're measuring it through the whole coil and everything like that, so it's going to have some resistance. Just something to keep in mind, like if it says like 0.3 or something, then a lot of times that's just 0. But what we can do is adjust this up and down until we can see our ohms increase. And it's worth noting here, there's a wire wound resistor in here because this coil has a lot of inductance. Inductance is kind of like electrical inertia. So just like how if you use a hammer against a nail, the hammer stops abruptly, so it imparts a large amount of force during that impact with the nail that drives the nail in with way more force, way more effectively than you can just push it in by hand. And likewise, inductance, if you shut off a circuit immediately, then because it doesn't have time to kind of ramp down, you'll have a voltage spike. So they put this resistor in here to shunt the voltage spike away. Nowadays, people use diodes, but this was before they invented diodes, or at least before they were really usable. They had vacuum tube diodes, but I forget if this was before semiconductors or not. Anyway, so our adjustment here, it's very important that, see how obviously a jam nut, you have to tighten the jam nut against the other nut before you start adjusting. The reason why is because this is spring loaded and it pushes the bottom nut up. So even if you tighten this with the same rotational position, the jam nut will push this bottom nut down instead. It'll throw your adjustment way off. It's actually a pretty sensitive adjustment. And I'll show you what I mean. So I have it now where it should be adjusted properly, but I'll show you how you can do a first time adjustment and then you just want to iterate it from there. So we have our, something's not happy. There we go. So we can throw a wrench on this, and so if you loosen it, that'll make the contacts move together. So what I want to do is tighten it down just until I see the ohms increase from like 1/2 to 5. There we go. So now what you want to do for your initial adjustment is you want to move it back between 1/4 and a 1/6. So between a 1/6 and 1/4 of a turn. So obviously you have your flats on the nut here and the corners of the nut. So 1/6 is corner to corner or flat to flat. And then 1/4 is like corner to corner, then the next flat, for example. So that's what we're going to do. Let me see here. So you can see I'm opening that. You can see the corner of the nut. So we're going to go corner, and just a touch more than that, and that should be a good initial adjustment. So now we can pull out our power supply. You can just use a car battery or whatever. Just make sure you connect it in such a way where you can disconnect it easily if you want to, so that you don't, like for example, this is misadjusted such that these are stuck closed all the time, then you might burn out your horn coil if you leave it on too long. Side note, this wire wound resistor actually makes a ton of heat, so if you only have this even going for a couple seconds, you'll start to see some smoke or something off of this. It's actually completely normal. You can always reach in here, and as long as this doesn't even feel warm, it should be fine. So now we can test our horn. See, we got the magic smoke, but that's off of the wire wound resistor, so no big deal. You can tell that was a little bit warbly, and that usually means that our contacts are spaced too far apart. So we can test that here. We're going to move them a little closer together, which is done by unscrewing this. And whenever you adjust these, you want to do it about 1/12 of a turn at most, which is like corner to flat or whatever. I think that is a bit more satisfactory of a tone there. We're going to call it good. The other thing you can do, I don't want to do this on video just because of the horn blaring again and again and again. It's going to get really annoying really fast, but it's not hard. If all you do is you adjust this 1/12 of a turn at a time until you find where it doesn't work. Make a mark, then go back until you find where it doesn't work, make a mark, and then you just set that right at the midpoint, and that should be basically a perfect adjustment. That's what I already did on this one. That's why I have that marked there. I just don't want to do that on video because you're going to hear the horn blare like 10 times, and I really don't think it's that complicated of what I just said on how to do that. Just loosen it until it stops working, tighten it until it stops working. Again, just a fraction of a turn at a time. And the midpoint of those tends to be your sweet spot for adjustment. Really nothing much to it, thankfully. And there's also not a whole lot else that can go wrong. Theoretically, if you just blare your horn for like, I don't know, minutes straight, I don't even know how long it would take. Theoretically, you could burn out your coil. Never really heard of anyone doing that though. Probably burning out this resistor would be more likely, which would give, if this resistor gets burnt out, the main effect you're going to have is that this thing is going to wear out really fast because of all the voltage spikes. So you're going to end up with pitting here, and eventually this is not going to make good contact anymore. But again, that is in the theoretical situation. If you're blaring your horn so long, you actually burn out the wire wound resistor, and then keep blaring it over some period of time over the next number of years where you end up burning these contacts too much. But that's more or less the only failure case I can think of, aside from like abject mechanical failure from abuse or rusting into pieces or being buried in salt water or something stupid like that. So not a whole lot going on with these, thankfully, which makes them easy to diagnose and fix. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you learned something, I'd appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. With that all being said, and leave any questions or comments in the comment section below. I read all my comments. I appreciate what people have to say. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you later.